Coming up on this episode of Courage Over Comfort by Matt Logan Speaks.
When I was in therapy after Deej died, or counseling, however you want to label it, what he had said was, we're gonna turn the light switch on to this, right? And he would kind of put it like that in different areas and different things. Okay, it's time we're gonna flip the light switch on in this area, right? We're gonna just shine a light on it. And I think that when we can sit down and do what we're doing right now, that shines a light on it for other people. My next guest is a remarkable, I'm going to call him young man. I don't know how old he is, but we're all young in someone's eyes, right? I'm going to cut to the chase. He's a volunteer firefighter, and that's not why I asked him here, but the courage that he has to be here involves the loss of his son by suicide. Please help me welcome Matthew Coy. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
I wanted to just throw that out there right away. I normally don't do that, and for some reason, based off of our conversation that we had before we were on air, I thought let's go after it.
Yep.
Because you said work and management, I think is how you worded it, didn't you?
Yep.
Tell us about Wyatt.
Wyatt was a good kid.
Yeah.
He was 18 when he died. He had struggled with depression for about 3 years. Prior to that, he was really a happy kid. Always moving, always going. Loved to play baseball. Really always loved to help other people. He always, looking back at it, I think he found his worth, his internal worth, when he could help other people.
We were talking about center before we were.
Yep.
So his center is to serve.
Absolutely.
Nice.
Absolutely. But like I said, he'd struggled for 3 years, and thought he was doing well. He died on a Thursday, and Wednesday night he got home from school, and his acceptance letter for the college of his choice was sitting on the kitchen table.
Really?
And I didn't happen to be home that night. I don't remember where I was.
Okay.
But my wife sent me a text that said Wyatt got his letter, and he said, "Mom, I can finally see my future."
Wow. Can I tell you how I heard about it?
Sure.
I was at a basketball game, and I believe the game was either it just ended or was just ending. And my Facebook, right? You can call on it on the Messenger.
Yep.
And we have a mutual connection, and that person had called and had told me about what happened and asked me to go and visit you.
Okay.
I was employed and working for a church at the time.
Okay.
I don't know if you knew that. And the church has kind of, and very rightfully so, has kind of a process in place, obviously. And I wasn't able to do that.
Mm-hmm.
But I just felt, as you started to describe his future, it made me think of the past and how I had found out about that. And I'm not sure if that's relevant or not, but I'll never forget it. I think about it all the time. And because I've lost a child in a very different way, but I think that it's important to know. I don't know. I felt like it's important for you to know that night I was thinking and praying for you.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thank you. I've in the last 3.5 years, I've often thought and sometimes said, there are people that get it and people that don't.
Yeah.
And God bless the people that don't get it, because they don't get it.
Yeah, very well said.
Yeah, unbelievable loss. Unbelievable loss. So that was on a Wednesday. Could see his future. Thursday came around, and we were set to leave on a snowmobile trip first thing Friday morning. And he got home from school and got a bit of bad news. He'd made a couple bad choices.
Sure.
And those caught up with him a little bit. And through the fog of depression and anxiety and racing thoughts and ruminating thoughts and all of those things that people can struggle with from time to time, caught up with him, and he couldn't see a way out. Our youngest child, we have 2 children, Wyatt and Morgan. Mm-hmm. And Morgan's his baby sister. And unfortunately, she found him. Mm. And that has had, obviously, a tremendous impact on her. Mm-hmm. He just couldn't see it. He couldn't see the value.
He couldn't see the value in like the next day, or he couldn't see the value.
Couldn't see the value in himself.
Okay.
The bit of bad news that he received was very temporary. Mm-hmm. But he couldn't see anything different. I like to think that, no, I don't like to think, I tend to think that he punished himself. Mm. And being the helper, being the one that takes care of things, that does the right thing and is the good kid. I had a moment where the mirror flashed up, and that wasn't who was in the mirror. Mm. And we talked earlier about living by our values.
Yeah.
And that, at least for me, when I'm having, historically, when I've had some dark time, I think I've realized that those are the times that I probably wasn't living according to my values. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't be surprised if it was a similar circumstance for Wyatt.
Yeah. You, I want you to talk about cousin Stevie, as you said. I think that was, when you were telling me about that, I think that seemed to be a pivotal moment in your life.
Absolutely.
After Wyatt passed away.
Absolutely. Give you a little bit more background. About 3 months after Wyatt died, mm-hmm. I was in a very dark place.
Yeah.
And everything in my world had come into question, because everything changed.
Yeah.
One of the thoughts that came to my head and really wouldn't leave was questioning my role in the new paradigm, the new family unit.
We talked about that quite a bit before recording, didn't we?
Yeah. And it was very different. I didn't know what my role was. I couldn't see where my value was. Mm-hmm. Morgan and my wife had become very, very close, which is a great thing, and always has been a great thing. But I couldn't see beyond that as it relates to my relationship with my wife and my daughter and my family. And those thoughts grabbed on and wouldn't let go.
Yeah.
I came to a very dark spot. And I got some help. And about a month after that event, I was talking with my cousin Stevie, who is 3 years my...
Shout out to cousin Stevie.
Shout out to cousin Stevie. Yep. Say hey to Cape Girardeau.
Sounds like a different podcast.
Yeah. He lost his father when his dad was age 56 by a astrocytoma,
Okay.
inoperable. And his father, Ron, was, like I said, 56, diagnosed in February, gone on September 11th, or about that period.
Sure.
And it was 2001, so it was...
No way.
Yeah, it was all of that same area.
Right.
So Steve knows grief.
Mm-hmm.
And after that event, I was talking with him on the phone and really lost, totally lost. And I said, I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't know how to deal with all of this.
Yeah.
There's so much pain. There's so much hurt. I can't possibly envision any way that I can get on top of this and move on. And he said, very matter-of-factly, well, it seems to me you probably ought to make something out of it. And that stuck. So here I am, trying to make something out of it.
And that comes into the wake, right?
Yep.
That actually, those two things tie together to me in a very powerful and remarkable way.
Mm-hmm.
And you were telling me that you don't know who said it. You know it was a male.
That's about it.
And what did they say?
He said, lean in.
Lean in.
Lean into it. And I thought at the time, this is Tuesday, and Wyatt died the previous Thursday.
Mm-hmm.
I thought at the time, what does that mean, if anything?
Right.
And fast forward a couple months, I'd been in my dark place. I was getting some help. And I'm not ashamed to say I was getting some help.
Oh, man, I still get lots of help.
And one of the tools that I learned about was simply acceptance.
It happened.
It happened. And commitment. What are you going to do about it?
Yeah.
And it wasn't until I learned about acceptance and commitment that phrase really took hold. Lean into it.
Yeah.
You're not going to change it.
It's kind of like the chess game, right? All these pieces moving into place in order to take the board.
Mm-hmm. And I had spent a lot of time and energy trying to make it different, trying to make it the same as it was, or at least not the way it is now, but more like it was before Wyatt died. And we talked about that earlier, too.
We did. We should have put some cameras on and mics on outside there, huh?
But I spent a lot of time and a lot of energy trying to figure out a way to change it. And it wasn't until I learned how to lean in
Yeah.
and I could say, okay, not ever going to change it,
Right.
but maybe I can make something out of it.
You're doing that right now.
And the cost is far too high still.
It is. Always will be.
Always will be. But that tells me that I can't do enough.
Yeah. Does that you can't do enough, does that give you fuel or does that give you despair?
Little of both.
Sure.
It gives me despair in that I know I'm in a battle I won't win.
Yeah.
And it gives me fuel in that...
But a battle's okay not to win.
It is. It is.
Let's win the war.
we'll talk about the Battle of Thermopylae in a minute. Despair in that it's a battle I can't win.
Yeah.
But hope in that my efforts can make a difference. And if those efforts do in fact make a difference, the price is still too high, but it becomes a little bit lower.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, price is way too high. You talked about not being able to win the battle.
Yeah.
During my time in counseling, and I still go to therapy.
Yeah.
My therapist suggested strongly that I give my depression a name.
Interesting. Really? I haven't heard that before.
And the idea was to draw a distinction between the self and the depression. Which was insightful and helpful.
Yeah.
I chose to name my depression Xerxes.
Okay. Explain to people who Xerxes is. That
Xerxes
don't know.
was the king and emperor of Persia, who went to battle in Thermopylae against a Greek and a Spartan, rather, named Leonidas. Mm-hmm. Leonidas in the last blast of the 300. So if the depression is Xerxes, that means I must be Leonidas. I ain't gonna win. Can't win. Mm-hmm. No possible way I can win. But I can be as inspiring and make as big of an impact as I possibly can before I don't win.
Right. Do you think, let me back up a second and say it like this, not do you think, are you saying that the battle of depression is not winnable?
It's manageable.
Okay.
It's manageable.
What does that look like?
That looks like a lot of hard work, all day, every day.
Yeah. Does that work include recognition?
Absolutely. Identifying it.
Yeah.
Accepting it.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of running away from it. Accepting it and committing to working it.
Yeah.
To manage it. My depression is a part of me. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Wyatt's death is a part of me.
Mm-hmm.
My depression and Wyatt's death aren't the sum total of me.
Right.
Just like my ugly bald head is not the total of me, but it's a part of me. And I could choose to wear a hairpiece, but that's just dumb. So I may as well lean into it.
Lean into it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do I think the battle of depression is unwinnable? No, I don't think that. I think that for me...
Can you negotiate with depression?
Nope.
Maybe that's a way to put it. And what I mean by that is like maybe negotiate's the wrong term, but that tell your depression essentially like, I'm going to go this direction, and if you're dragging behind, I can't, I guess, potentially stop you, but you're not going to direct my path.
Mm-hmm. I like the analogy of a muzzle. Sometimes that dog really wants to bite.
Sure.
And we have to learn how to get the muzzle on before it bites us.
Yeah.
And we also have to learn when it's safe to take the muzzle off.
Yeah.
But for me, I have accepted that it will always be there.
What would you say to people who try to deny it? I see that often, right? Like people deny that they have depression or whatever. What would you say to that? What should someone do?
What should someone do? It's going to be different for everybody.
Yeah.
The most helpful thing that I did was acknowledge it and say, there you are. And to make the distinction between the depression and the self. And that in turn helped me to start to learn how to tell the difference between the narrative the depression was trying to relay.
Even manipulate, maybe.
Absolutely manipulative. It's a nasty little devil. But make that distinction between that narrative and the narrative that I want, by which I want to live my life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I said to myself I wasn't going to do this, but I want to ask your permission to talk. You said it very well, and I'm not going to paraphrase it, but basically when someone comes to you and they tell you that they understand how you feel, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but we talked about that. Talk about that for a minute, because it is. I think it's really important.
I'll give you a...
Let me say it this way. It's crucial.
Oh, yeah.
There's a very huge difference between important and crucial.
Yep.
We need to call it crucial.
Yep. On April 2nd, 2017, this is 2.5 months after Wyatt died, this is the pinnacle of my darkest time. I had left my house. I had armed myself. And I was angry. And I was done. I went to a location. Stopped. Thought. Very briefly thought that this is just going to cause more hurt. Can't do that. So I turned around and went home. There's a lot of struggle with trying to reconcile that moment vis-a-vis Wyatt in the same position 2.5 months earlier. But anyway, I turned around and went home, and my family had alerted emergency services as to what she thought was going to happen. And so I was stopped on the way home. And as a firefighter and an EMT, I work with these guys all the time.
Yeah.
And they're intimately aware of the circumstance and the background and all of those things. And one of the deputies said to me, "I know just how you feel." And my response in that very tense, very fragile, very on-edge time was, "Really? I didn't know you had a son that killed himself with a 12 gauge."
Yeah.
It's hard to say even now. And then the deputy said, you know what, you're right, I don't. I'm glad I don't, but I'm sorry that you do.
Yeah.
Okay. That took me a long time to forgive. But I got there.
I'm glad to hear that you did.
But it did teach me that there's people that get it and people that don't.
Mm-hmm.
And I said before, God bless the people that don't get it. But then I turned it the other direction. And I thought to myself, if they don't have any idea what I'm going through, I don't have any idea what anybody else is going through. So that instant, that moment, ultimately taught me a lot about empathy.
Mm.
I don't have to understand what other people are going through. And actually to try and understand it is probably folly and probably not very constructive.
What do you mean by that?
Not very constructive if I'm trying to believe that I know how people feel,
Mm-hmm.
that I understand completely how they got to the spot in their life that they're at, whether it's a good spot or a bad spot. I don't know that path. I'm only seeing a snapshot.
Yeah.
And to assume that I've walked that very same path with the very same set of experiences and circumstances almost belittles their experience. But just to acknowledge, rather to just acknowledge that I see you're in this place. And if that's a good place, I'm happy for you.
Yeah.
And if that's not a good place, I'm sorry that you're in that place. How can I help?
Do you think, you say, I'm sorry that you're in that place, and I'm just thinking, especially recently, I've tried to say, that sucks,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like, sometimes there's not a place to say I'm sorry, even,
Right.
is there? On their journey, in their experience, on their path.
Yep.
Just to say, man, that sucks.
Tough stuff.
Because if you say I'm sorry, doesn't that kind of get you into that same place? I know how you feel.
A little bit.
Does that make sense?
A little bit.
Not saying that you shouldn't. I'm just saying that I've just really started to learn that, especially more recently, last 6-7 months maybe.
Yep. Yeah. Sorry implies an apology.
Yeah.
An apology implies some wrongdoing.
Yeah.
Some wrongdoing implies that
An understanding.
an
almost.
understanding.
Yeah.
And that's not always accurate.
Yeah. I'm not saying you're wrong, dude.
No.
But I'm just saying, like,
No,
that
I
made
get
me
it.
think of it. Like,
Yeah.
I've been trying to. Oh, that sucks.
And then that person can say, yeah.
It opens them up, I think.
Yep.
But yeah.
Yep. And
What do you think would be the leaning into it? We're going to look at that a little bit more. What do you think would be the thing? What does that mean, essentially? Like, lean into it. I think there's a little bit of direction that you could go with that. A couple different directions.
Absolutely.
Is what I mean, right?
Absolutely.
Explain what that lean into it means to you.
For me,
Yeah.
I can describe it maybe better by verbalizing what it's not.
Okay.
Leaning into my grief
Mm-hmm.
is not keeping myself busy to keep my mind off of it. Leaning into it for me is not saying I'm fine. And there's some dangers with that. You have to be careful where you use that kind of thing.
Yeah.
but leaning into it and say, yeah, I'm in the height. I'm in a very grievous moment, and acknowledge it, because once you acknowledge it and can kind of put your mind around it, encapsulate it, if you will, then it becomes easier to define, and the tools that a person can utilize have a better focus. Leaning into it for me means talking about my boy.
Yeah.
And now for a quick break for you to think of someone you can encourage today. And now, back to the episode.
Thanks for bringing him with today.
He's with me all the time.
Absolutely.
Leaning into it is not shying away from how he lost his life, but making something out of it. That's not to say that the way that he died should define his life.
Right.
But for me, it makes it easier to remember his life by not running away from his death.
Yeah.
Leaning into it for me, not just for the loss of my son, but for my own struggles. Makes it, if you lean into it and can encapsulate it, makes it a little more definable. And if it's more definable and discrete, it's a little easier to apply those tools.
You take your car to a mechanic because the light is on, and if that mechanic can't identify, can't be fixed or patched.
Yep.
Leaning into it, the light's on.
Let's figure out what it is.
Yeah.
Let's do something about it. And sometimes you think you got it fixed and the damn light comes back on.
Right.
Yeah. So what do? Dig into it again.
Yeah. And it's a lot of cases a different problem. Yeah.
Yeah. But driving around with the light on, it might be okay. It might not. And
In my experience with the light on, it's okay for a few minutes, sometimes, maybe a couple of months even, but then at some point, that light means something.
Absolutely. and you ought better to deal with it up front
Yeah.
before it turns into something that's larger than it was before,
Yeah.
and therefore more difficult to manage.
And sometimes even impossible to manage.
Sometimes.
Yeah. What advice would you give to people? Let's start with, what advice would you give to people who do understand?
You're not alone. It's really...
Did you feel like you were alone?
Oh, completely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because there's so much stigma surrounding mental illness. And so much shame surrounding suicide. I internalized that a lot.
Okay.
But to know, for people that get it about suicide and losing a loved one to suicide, and the mental health struggles that clearly those people have struggled with, you're not alone.
Yeah.
It's okay to ask for help. it's okay to feel what you're feeling. Those are the feelings that you have are your feelings, and as such, they're legitimate.
Yeah.
And they're relevant. I would say to the people that get it about losing a child, I see you hurting. I'm proud of you for keeping on. I wish we didn't get it.
Yeah. Did it surprise you, or has it yet, maybe is a better way to put it, that there's a lot of people who have lost children that you had no idea that they lost them? Like people that you know. Maybe not know real closely, but like see them at the grocery store all the time, or you know what I mean?
I know who that person is, right?
Right. You know who the person is, and then you lose a child, and then you find out you share that commonality. Have you seen or been surprised by that yet? Because I've been blown away by it.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. That was a very bad way to put it.
It's all good.
I'm sorry.
It's all good.
People say bus stuff to me all the time, and it's, but I apologize.
And
I meant by wind.
Yep.
Yeah.
I got you.
Okay.
I got you. It's good. It's almost the short answer is yes.
Yeah.
The longer answer is that it's almost like when that happens, when I make that realization, it's almost like deja vu.
Sure.
I don't know whether it's something in their eyes or how they interact with others. But I think I can kind of intuitively tell. There's something there.
Yeah.
They get it.
Yeah.
At least to some extent, they get it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a surprise. Not a good surprise, because that's a lot of pain.
Yeah. And that's really, honestly, why I've really dug in and tried to help people share stories. Because I think it's so important. I was telling you when I was turning the lights on, bright light, right? Kind of gave you that half a second warning. And you said mental illness and the shame and all these different things. I think that it's let me put it like this. When I was in therapy after Deej died, or counseling, however you want to label it, what he had said was, we're going to turn the light switch on to this, right? And he would kind of put it like that in different areas and different things. Okay, it's time we're going to flip the light switch on in this area, right? We're going to just shine a light on it. And I think that when we can sit down and do what we're doing right now, that shines a light on it for other people. And what I was surprised by is, like, before Deej died, not knowing these things and not knowing that these people had lost children, man, I wanted to, at minimum, pray for them. And, hey, what can I do to talk about it with you? So I think that we need to do as good a job as we can to shine lights on things. Turn the switch on, right? Because where do the monsters hide?
In the dark.
Right. Turning the light switch on drives them in the corner, and then we can sit down and have a conversation with them.
Yep.
I tell people all the time that I do what I do and because I have conversations with my monsters.
Right.
Right? Like, I have to, because
you got to keep them in check.
You're right.
Yep.
And you use muzzle for depression and some of that, but I think it's really the same thing, that we have to do those things in order to because we're not alone. That's where I'm really circling back to. We are not alone, and we need to know and understand that we're not alone. And in order to know and understand that we're not alone, we need other people to talk about it.
And then with other people to talk about it, it needs to be safe to talk about it.
Yes.
It needs to be okay to talk about it.
Yes.
It needs to be okay to not be okay.
Yes. But it's also, I think, important to understand that it's okay to not be okay, but it's important to understand that it's not okay to stay not okay.
Amen. Right.
Right?
It's okay to not be okay.
Yeah.
But do something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We talked about those little itty bitty tiny baby steps earlier.
It's still
outside.
It's still progress.
Right. It's so important.
Mm-hmm.
The easy way out, selfish. You threw some other terms out. Let's shine a light on that.
There's a lot of what I'll call misconceptions out there. There's a lot of human nature out there. And I think it's human nature to assume we understand. When I hear people talk about selfish, attention-seeking, giving up, taking the easy way out, I get visibly angry because in my mind, in my view, people that are comfortable expressing those thoughts, in my view, they don't have a clue what the monster's like. And at some level, I'm really glad they don't. On another level, I want to grab them by the shoulders and shake them. And at another level that I'm getting more comfortable with as time goes on, I want to help them. I want to help them to learn empathy rather than judgment. And oftentimes when people as a species, when they do hurtful things, they don't have a clue that it's hurtful. So for me, it's important to try to help those people make a baby step.
You say make them. I'm not saying that's wrong.
Yeah, that's an interesting observation.
But I think, so people talk about leadership and, all these books and blah, blah, blah. I could go on, and it always, not always, almost always, it circles back to not making anybody do anything. I think that that's very powerful because I think that we do have to, at times, make somebody and acknowledge at minimum.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I say that in a loving way, actually. Right? I don't mean that forcefully or whatever, but I think it's crucial again that we do those things, right? That we make people acknowledge that, okay, yeah, I didn't see it that way or whatever else. So I like how you said that.
But you're right. Make someone sounds authoritarian.
I know you didn't mean it
no,
that way.
I absolutely didn't mean it that way, but it gives me pause. And
I think in the context, though, it's you're correct.
well, maybe it should be to help them see the value in a different way of thinking.
Yeah. I talk about, I speak on tolerance and stuff quite a bit. And to me, it's like, I think that's where we get into a lot of problems is when we tolerate things. When we simply tolerate wrong things, right? And brush them off as, he's only 3.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
And I think that's where you need to make a 3-year-old do certain things at some point. You need to make a 10-year-old do certain things at certain points. And I don't mean that in a negative way. And many people, and God included, knows that I made my kids do things I probably shouldn't have made them do. But I also made them do things that they needed to do, which, your daughter graduated, and she's like a real people now.
She's
and that's the idea, isn't it?
It is.
And that's what I think by making, we can really help people be real people.
And now, a quick break. And it's not a Kit Kat, sorry. And now, back to the episode.
Shine the light.
Shine the light on it.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things that I made my kids do. And I've had a really hard time reconciling some of those.
Sure.
Post Wyatt.
Yeah.
There's a lot of guilt there. While I was in counseling, another one of the exercises that I completed was writing a letter to Wyatt, which I did, and that was awful. And the second part of the exercise was write a letter from Wyatt to me.
Wow.
And I wrote 2 of those. One of those was what I hoped Wyatt would say. And the other was what I feared Wyatt would say. And the one where I fear what he would say revolves around a singular idea. And that is you and your damned integrity. That's been hard to reconcile. And I'm a long ways from reconciliation with that. There's still a lot of guilt there. Had I known that his view of right and wrong was instilled so strongly that he took action when he was wrong, I gotta live with that all day, every day. Is integrity important? One of my core values. What could I have done differently? Haunting.
Extremely. If memory serves, you have a foundation of some type, or
yeah, and that was
maybe foundation's not the right word, but
there's a fund.
Sure.
There's a fund. Okay. This is a cool story. A year ago, this past April, my wife and I helped to chaperone a trip to San Francisco with I think it was a band and the choir. It was for sure the choir. And we had a blizzard on the way up to the airport, and the whole trip was just basically a disaster. But also a study in resilience. Those kids did a great job. Those instructors did a great job. Resilience and tenacity and creativity, resourcefulness. One of the other chaperones, I learned was kind of a neighbor. We live in the same general vicinity. And I didn't know him very well at all before that trip. I knew that, and that's to say I knew his name.
Mm-hmm.
That was in April. That trip was in April. And we had conversations on the trip, and, I would after the trip, I'd refer to him as a good acquaintance. He's not somebody I would call if things were struggling or if I needed help, and because we just weren't there yet. Fast forward to September. I am in Indianapolis alone at a trade show. I get back to the hotel, and this individual sends me a text. And the text is, well, I'd like to snowmobile, right? And I responded by saying, yeah, that's kind of the understatement of the century. He was a nut.
Yeah.
And the response came back, what do you think about a memorial ride? And my immediate response to him was, hang on a second, I gotta check myself here for a minute, so it's gonna be a while.
Sure.
And I had thought often about doing a memorial snowmobile ride, and never really believed, and still don't, that I have the emotional horsepower to make that go.
Yeah.
Just too hard.
Yeah.
And I responded back. I said, and told him just that. I've often thought about doing that, but I just don't think I could make it happen. I think it'd be too hard. And the response was, well, that settles it. And so the planning started. They selected January 19th, which is the day that Wyatt died. That date was selected partially because that's the day that Wyatt died, and partially because it was a Sunday that we'd probably have some snow.
Sure.
Then the planning turned to real planning and organizing, and the group that was kind of heading this up and worked together really well started talking about sponsorships and charging a registration fee and these kinds of things. And I thought at that time, I said, now we're talking about money. What's the plan? What are you going to do with that? Not that I disagree with the money part. That's fine. That's good. But you got to do something with it.
Yeah.
And they said, well, we'll just, just a gift to the Coy family. No way. So we started looking for other things to do. And Wyatt was always a helper. So we thought about a scholarship program, specifically to aid and assist a young person going into the field of mental health. I put out a few feelers and of some folks that I know that have managed scholarship programs. And, what do you do? How do you do the scholarship thing? And I was directed towards the Rochester Area Foundation, And that's one of the things that they do is administer scholarship programs and those kinds of things. So we had a conversation there, and that was a good fit. But the price tag was pretty high. The buy-in was pretty high.
Sure.
In order to do a scholarship program, it was $25,000.
Sure.
And I get it. You got to have enough in there to make it go.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I came out of that meeting. We came out of that meeting pretty deflated. And I thought, well, maybe if we do this for 10 years, we'll get there.
Yeah.
And so the event came and went, and we deposited just north of $40,000. I was flabbergasted, over the moon, not joyful, grateful.
Yeah.
People came out of the woodwork to help. And my biggest fear, I think, in not doing this myself early on, I use the emotional horsepower thing as an excuse. I was scared people forgot. And I knew I couldn't handle having that flashed in my face. I'm pretty happy to be wrong.
Yeah. It's good to be wrong.
It's good to be wrong sometimes. Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. But, yeah, so we're doing some good with it.
That's great.
And it's now an endowment that's going to keep on in perpetuity.
Yeah.
And which means that Wyatt's going to be helping people forever.
Yeah. That's fantastic. I think that's a good way to end. Thanks for bringing Wyatt with you today. I really appreciate that.
Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. We'll see you next time.